The letter arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under her apartment door like a ghost from a life she'd buried. Clara, 24, stood frozen in her tiny Brooklyn kitchen, the paper trembling in her hands, her name scrawled in her mother's unmistakable cursive. It was the first contact in 5 years, since her parents vanished from Ohio without a word, leaving her to face the world alone at 19. All because she loved a woman. She sank onto the worn linoleum floor, her back against the fridge, as memories flooded back. Clara had grown up in a small Ohio town, where the air smelled of cut grass and church bells rang every Sunday. Her parents, Ellen and Robert, were pillars of their community, devout, respected, and rigid. Clara had always been their pride, a straight-A student with a smile that could charm anyone. But at 17, when she told them about Sarah, the girl who made her heart race, their faces turned to stone. "This isn't you," her mother had said, voice sharp as a blade. "You'll fix this, or you're no daughter of ours." Clara didn't fix it. She couldn't. Loving Sarah felt like breathing, and she wasn't about to stop. Sarah was her opposite in every way, bold where Clara was cautious, with wild blonde hair and a laugh that echoed like summer. They met in art class, bonding over smudged charcoal sketches and whispered dreams. By 18, they were inseparable, stealing kisses behind the school gym, planning a future in New York where they could be free. But freedom came at a cost. Clara's parents gave her an ultimatum: end it with Sarah or lose everything. She chose Sarah, and the next day, her parents were gone. No note, no call, just an empty house and a neighbor's awkward explanation. They moved. Out of state. Didn't say where. Clara's world shattered. She was 19, alone, with no family, no money, and a heart full of questions. Why hadn't they fought for her? How could they just disappear? Sarah became her anchor, the one person who stayed when the ground fell away. Together, they scraped by, working odd jobs, eventually moving to New York to chase their dreams, Clara as a writer, Sarah as a painter. But the pain of her parents' abandonment lingered, a bruise that never faded. Now, holding the letter, Clara's chest tightened. She tore it open, her eyes scanning the words. "We're sorry. We were wrong. Please come home." Home. The word felt foreign, like a language she'd forgotten. They were in Oregon now, the letter said, and her father was sick. They wanted to see her. They begged. Clara's first instinct was to crumple the paper and throw it away. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the faint tremble in her mother's handwriting. Or maybe it was the ache she'd carried for years. The part of her that still longed for answers. She called Sarah, who was at her studio across town. "They wrote me," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They want me to come back." Sarah was silent for a moment, then asked, "What do you want to do?" Clara didn't know. She only knew the hurt was still raw, and the idea of facing them again felt like stepping into a storm. That night, Clara and Sarah sat on their thrift store couch, the letter between them like a live wire. Sarah's hand found Clara's, her touch steady. "You don't owe them anything," Sarah said, her green eyes fierce. "But if you need to go, I'm with you. Always." Clara nodded, tears stinging her eyes. She wasn't sure if she was ready to face her parents, but she knew she couldn't keep running from the past. The next morning, Clara booked a flight to Oregon. She didn't tell her parents she was coming. She wasn't sure she'd even see them. But she needed to stand on their doorstep, to look into their eyes and ask why. Why they left her. Why they thought her love was a sin. Why they thought they could summon her back now, after years of silence. As the plane took off, Clara stared out the window, the New York skyline fading below. Her heart pounded with a mix of fear and resolve. This wasn't just a tri-pit, it was a reckoning. In Oregon, the air was crisp, scented with pine and damp earth. Clara rented a car and drove to the address in the letter, a small house in a quiet suburb. Her hands shook as she parked across the street, watching the house for signs of life. The curtains were drawn, but a faint light glowed inside. She imagined her parents there, older now, maybe softer, maybe broken. Did they regret what they'd done? Or was this just another way to control her? Clara sat there for an hour, the weight of 5 years pressing down. She thought of Sarah, waiting back in New York, and the life they'd built together. She thought of the girl she'd been at 19, abandoned and terrified, and the woman she'd become, stronger, but still carrying that wound. Finally, she stepped out of the car, her boots crunching on the gravel. She wasn't sure what she'd say, but she knew one thing: she wasn't that scared girl anymore. Whatever happened next, she'd face it on her terms. Clara stood on the porch, her breath visible in the cold Oregon air. The doorbell felt like a trigger, her finger hovering over it as her heart raced. She hadn't seen her parents in 5 years, and now, only a wooden door separated her from the people who'd left her behind. She pressed the bell, the chime echoing inside like a warning. The door opened slowly, revealing her mother, Ellen, now 55. Her hair streaked with gray, her face lined with something Clara couldn't read: guilt, maybe, or exhaustion. Clara. Ellen's voice cracked, her eyes widening. Clara nodded, her throat tight, unable to speak. Her mother stepped forward, arms half raised as if to hug her. But Clara stepped back, her body stiff. "You wrote me," she said, her voice low but steady. "I'm here." Ellen ushered her inside, the house smelling of lavender and old wood. The living room was modest, with faded furniture and a cross hanging above the fireplace. Clara's father, Robert, sat in an armchair, a blanket over his lap, his face gaunt. He was 58 but looked older, his eyes sunken, his hands trembling slightly. "Clara," he said, his voice weak. "You came." She nodded, her gaze flicking between them. The air felt heavy, like it was holding all their unsaid words. They sat, awkward and silent, until Ellen broke the tension. "We didn't think you'd come," she said, her hands twisting in her lap. We made mistakes, Clara. We know that now." Clara's jaw tightened. Mistakes. They hadn't just made mistakes, they'd erased her from their lives. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Why?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Why did you leave without a word?" Robert coughed, a dry, rattling sound, and Ellen glanced at him, worry flashing across her face. "We thought we were protecting you," Ellen said softly. "We thought, if we gave you space, you'd come back to us. To God." Clara's hands clenched into fists. "You thought abandoning me would fix me. Because I love Sarah." Her voice rose, years of pain spilling out. "You left me with nothing. No family, no home, no explanation." Ellen's eyes filled with tears, but Clara didn't soften. She'd spent too many nights crying herself to sleep, wondering what she'd done wrong. Robert spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "We were wrong, Clara. We see that now. I'm sick. Cancer. We just want to make things right before." He trailed off, and Clara's stomach twisted. She'd imagined this moment confronting them, unloading her anger, but seeing her father like this, frail and fading, threw her off balance. She stood, needing air, and walked to the window. Outside, the street was quiet, the kind of place where kids rode bikes and neighbors waved. It was so different from the chaos of New York, from the life she'd built with Sarah. "You don't get to just apologize and expect me to forget," she said, not turning around. "You broke me." Ellen stood, reaching out but stopping short. "We know we failed you," she said, "but we're asking for a chance. Please." Clara turned, her eyes burning. "A chance? After 5 years of silence? You don't even know me anymore." She thought of Sarah, of their tiny apartment filled with laughter and love, of the strength it took to rebuild after they'd left her. She wasn't sure she could let them back in, not after everything. But as she looked at her father, his breathing shallow, she felt a pang of something she didn't want to name, pity, maybe, or the ghost of love she'd once had for them. They talked for hours, the conversation raw and halting. Ellen admitted they'd moved to Oregon to start over, to escape the gossip of their small town. They'd thought Clara would come to her senses and follow them, renouncing her sin. Instead, she'd thrived without them, building a life with Sarah, writing for a small magazine, finding her place in the world. Robert listened, his eyes distant, as if grappling with the daughter he no longer knew. As night fell, Clara felt drained. She agreed to stay for a few days, not because she forgave them, but because she needed answers. She needed to understand how love could turn to abandonment, and whether forgiveness was even possible. When she called Sarah that night, her voice trembled. "They're different now," she said. "But I don't know if I can trust them." Sarah's voice was steady, grounding. "You don't have to decide now. Just take it one step at a time. I'm here." Clara hung up, staring at the ceiling of the guest room, her parents' house both familiar and foreign. She wasn't sure what she'd find in the days ahead, but she knew one thing: she wasn't here to fix them. She was here to face her past, to reclaim the pieces of herself they'd tried to take. Tomorrow, she'd ask the harder questions, and she'd do it for herself, not for them. Morning light filtered through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the guest room. Clara lay awake, her mind churning with the weight of yesterday's confrontation. She'd come to Oregon for answers, but each word from her parents felt like a half-truth, a bandage on a wound too deep to heal. She rose, pulling on her jacket, and headed downstairs, determined to dig deeper. Ellen was in the kitchen, brewing coffee, her movements slow and deliberate. "You're up early," she said, offering a tentative smile. Clara nodded, accepting a mug but keeping her distance. "I need to know more," she said, her voice firm. "Why did you think leaving me would change who I am?" Ellen's smile faded, and she sat at the table, gesturing for Clara to join her. Robert was still asleep, his condition worsening, and the house felt quieter without him. Ellen took a deep breath, her hands wrapped around her mug. "We were scared," she admitted. "Our church, our friends, they all said your choice was wrong. We thought if we stayed, we'd enable it. We thought moving would shock you into changing." Clara's chest tightened. "My choice," she said, her voice sharp. "Loving Sarah isn't a choice. It's who I am. You didn't just leave, you erased me." Ellen flinched, tears welling up. "We didn't know how to handle it," she said. "We thought we were saving your soul." Clara laughed, a bitter sound. "Saving my soul? You left me with nothing. I was 19. Ellen. I had to figure out how to survive without you." The words hung between them, heavy and unyielding. Ellen reached out, but Clara pulled back. "I'm not here to make you feel better," Clara said. "I'm here to understand." The day passed in fragments, conversations that started and stopped, silences filled with years of hurt. Robert joined them later, his presence a reminder of why Clara had come. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight. "I see you now," he said, his eyes meeting hers. "You're strong. Stronger than we ever were." Clara wanted to believe him, but trust was a fragile thing, and hers had been shattered long ago. She spent the afternoon walking the neighborhood, the quiet streets a stark contrast to New York's chaos. She thought of Sarah, of their late-night talks about the future, of the way Sarah's laugh could pull her out of any darkness. Clara called her, needing that anchor. "They're trying," she told Sarah, her voice soft. "But it's not enough." "Not yet." Sarah listened, her presence steady even from thousands of miles away. "You're doing this for you," she said. "Not them. Remember that." That evening, Clara sat with her parents again, the air less tense but still charged. She asked about their lives in Oregon, about the years she'd missed. Ellen spoke of their new church, one that preached acceptance, though she admitted it took time to unlearn their old beliefs. Robert talked about his diagnosis, how it forced him to face his regrets. "I thought I was doing right by you," he said. "But I was wrong. I see that now." Clara listened, her heart caught between anger and a flicker of hope. She told them about her life, her writing, her friends, her love for Sarah. She watched their faces, searching for judgment, but found something else instead: curiosity, maybe even pride. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. As night fell, Clara felt a shift inside her, a sense that she was reclaiming her story, piece by piece. She went to bed with a plan. Tomorrow, she'd ask them to meet Sarah, to see the woman who'd been her rock. It was a test not just for them, but for herself. Could she let them into her world? Even a little. Could they accept her as she was? The answers weren't clear. But for the first time, Clara felt ready to face them, whatever they might be. Clara woke to the sound of rain tapping against the window, a steady rhythm that mirrored her racing thoughts. Today, she'd asked the question that had been burning since she arrived: would her parents meet Sarah? The idea felt like a gamble, a way to test their apologies against the reality of her life. She dressed slowly, her hands steady but her heart unsteady, and headed downstairs. Ellen was at the stove, making pancakes, the smell warm and familiar. Robert sat at the table, looking slightly stronger today, though his eyes still held a quiet weariness. "Morning," Clara said, her voice neutral. They greeted her with cautious smiles, sensing the weight of what was coming. Over breakfast, Clara didn't waste time. "I want you to meet Sarah," she said, her gaze steady. "She's my partner, my family. If you want me in your lives, you need to know her." The room went still. Ellen's fork paused midair, and Robert's eyes flicked to his wife before settling on Clara. "We'd like that," he said, his voice soft but certain. Ellen nodded, though her expression was harder to read. "When can she come?" she asked. Clara hadn't expected them to agree so quickly, and it threw her off balance. "I'll talk to her," she said. "Maybe next week." Inside, she braced for disappointment, knowing words were easier than actions. Clara called Sarah that afternoon, her voice shaking with nerves. "They said yes," She told her. They want to meet you. Sarah laughed. A sound that warmed Clara even through the phone. Okay. I'll book a flight. But are you sure you're ready for this? Clara wasn't sure. But she knew she needed Sarah there. Not just for support, but to show her parents what love looked like, real, unshakable love. The rest of the day was quieter. The conversation less charged but still heavy with unspoken questions. Clara asked about their church. Curious about the shift Ellen had mentioned. It's different here, Ellen said. They talk about love, not judgment. It made us see things differently. Clara wanted to believe her, but years of hurt made her wary. She pressed them, asking how they'd changed, what they'd do differently now. Their answers were earnest but vague, and Clara felt the gap between them, years of absence that couldn't be bridged in a few days. That evening, Clara walked to a nearby park, needing space to think. The rain had stopped, leaving the air fresh and the ground slick. She sat on a bench, watching families pass by, and thought about her own. She'd spent so long hating her parents, but now, seeing them frail and regretful, she felt something softer creeping in, not forgiveness, but a willingness to listen. She texted Sarah a photo of the park, the words "I miss you" attached. Sarah replied with a heart emoji, and Clara smiled, feeling grounded again. When she returned to the house, Robert was waiting in the living room, a photo album open on his lap. I thought you might want to see these, he said, his voice gentle. The album was filled with pictures of Clara as a child, her first bike, her high school graduation, moments she'd forgotten. She sat beside him, her throat tight, as he turned the pages. We never stopped loving you, he said. We just didn't know how to show it. Clara didn't respond, but she let the words settle, their weight both painful and healing. As she went to bed, Clara felt a flicker of hope, tempered by caution. Her parents were trying, but meeting Sarah would be the real test. She fell asleep thinking of Sarah's smile, her strength, and the life they'd built together, a life her parents would have to accept if they wanted to be part of hers. Sarah's flight landed in Portland at noon, and Clara's heart raced as she waited at the airport. When Sarah appeared, her blonde hair catching the light, Clara ran to her, wrapping her in a hug that felt like coming home. You're here, Clara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Sarah smiled, her eyes bright. Always, she said, kissing Clara's forehead. They drove to the house, Sarah's hand on Clara's knee, a steady reminder of their shared strength. When they arrived, Ellen opened the door, her expression a mix of nerves and warmth. You must be Sarah, she said, extending a hand. Sarah shook it, her smile polite but guarded. Nice to meet you, she said, her voice steady. Robert was in the living room, standing with effort to greet them. Clara watched her parents closely, searching for any sign of judgment, but found only awkward sincerity. They sat together, the air thick with tension. Sarah broke the ice, asking about their life in Oregon, her charm easing the room. Ellen responded eagerly, talking about her garden, while Robert listened, his eyes flicking between Clara and Sarah. Clara felt a strange mix of pride and protectiveness. Sarah was her world, and she needed her parents to see that. Over dinner, the conversation turned personal. Sarah shared stories of their life in New York, their tiny apartment, their late-night painting sessions, the way they built a family of friends. Clara watched her parents' faces, seeing curiosity and something like regret. You two seem happy, Ellen said, her voice soft. Clara nodded, her hand finding Sarah's under the table. We are, she said. But it wasn't easy. Not after you left. The words landed hard, and the room fell silent. Robert cleared his throat. We know we hurt you, he said. We can't change that, but we want to try now. Sarah squeezed Clara's hand, a silent signal of support. What does trying look like? Sarah asked, her tone calm but direct. Ellen hesitated, then said, we want to know you both. To be part of your lives. If you'll let us. Clara's chest tightened. She wanted to believe them, but trust was hard won. You don't get to just step back in, she said. You need to prove it. Robert nodded, his eyes glistening. We will, he said. As long as I have left. The mention of his illness hung heavy, a reminder of why they were here. After dinner, Claire and Sarah walked to the park, needing air. They're trying, Sarah said, her voice gentle. But it's okay if you're not ready. Clara nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I want to forgive them, she said. But I'm scared they'll hurt me again. Sarah pulled her close, her warmth steadying Clara. Whatever happens, we'll face it together, she said. Back at the house, Clara found Ellen in the kitchen, washing dishes. Thank you for bringing Sarah, Ellen said, her voice quiet. She's good for you. Clara nodded, her throat tight. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a step. As she and Sarah went to bed, Clara felt a fragile hope growing, a possibility that healing might be possible, one careful step at a time. The next morning, Clara and Sarah sat with Ellen and Robert over coffee, the atmosphere lighter but still fragile. Clara noticed small changes: Ellen's gentle questions about Sarah's art, Robert's quiet smiles as they talked. They were trying. And it stirred something in Clara, a mix of hope and caution. She wanted to believe they could rebuild. But the past was a heavy shadow. After breakfast, Ellen suggested a drive to the coast, a place Clara used to love as a child. They agreed, piling into the car, the ocean a shimmering promise on the horizon. The drive was quiet at first, but Sarah's easy humor broke the tension. Coaxing laughs from even Robert. The beach. They walked along the shore, the wind sharp and salty. Clara watched her parents, seeing them not as the giants of her childhood, but as flawed, human, and trying to change. Ellen pulled Clara aside as Sarah and Robert walked ahead. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I see how much you love her. And I was wrong to try to take that away. Clara's eyes stung, but she nodded. I needed you, she said. And you left. Ellen's tears fell freely now. I know. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. If you'll let me. Clara didn't respond, but she let her mother's words settle. A seed of possibility. Back at the house, they spent the evening sharing stories. Sarah showed them photos of her paintings, vibrant canvases that captured life's raw beauty. Robert, his strength fading, listened intently, asking questions that showed genuine interest. Clara felt a shift, a sense that they were seeing her not the daughter they'd wanted, but the woman she'd become. As the visit neared its end, Clara and Sarah prepared to return to New York. The night before their flight, Robert called Clara to his side. I don't have much time, he said, his voice weak. But I'm proud of you. And I'm sorry. Clara's throat tightened, and she took his hand, feeling the weight of years between them. I'm trying to forgive you, she said. But it's going to take time. Ellen walked them to the car the next morning, her eyes red but hopeful. Come back, she said. Please. Clara nodded, Her heart caught between pain and possibility. As they drove away, Sarah reached for her hand. "You did good," she said. Clara smiled, feeling lighter. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew she'd face it with Sarah by her side. Back in New York, Clara and Sarah settled into their routine, but something had shifted. The trip to Oregon had cracked open a door Clara thought she'd closed forever. She carried her parents' apologies like stones in her pocket, weighty, but not unbearable. Over the next few weeks, she and Ellen began texting. Small messages about daily life. Careful steps toward something new. Clara threw herself into her writing, pouring her emotions into a story about love, loss, and reconciliation. Sarah's paintings took on new depth, inspired by the raw honesty of their trip. They talked late into the night, processing what it meant to let her parents back in. "They're trying," Sarah said one evening, her voice soft. "But you set the pace." Clara nodded, grateful for Sarah's steady presence. Months later, Clara got a call from Ellen. Robert's condition had worsened, and he didn't have long. Clara flew to Oregon alone this time, her heart heavy but resolute. At the hospital, she sat by her father's side, holding his hand as he slept. When he woke, he smiled weakly. "You're here," he said. "That's enough." Clara stayed for days, talking with her parents, sharing memories, and letting go of some of the anger she'd carried. Robert passed a week later, and Clara stayed for the funeral, standing beside Ellen as they said goodbye. It wasn't perfect, but it was closure. Ellen hugged her tightly afterward, whispering, "We're family, Clara. We'll figure it out." Clara nodded, tears falling, knowing it wouldn't be easy but feeling ready to try. Back in New York, Clara and Sarah planned a small wedding, a celebration of their love and resilience. They invited Ellen, who came, her presence a quiet testament to change. As Clara and Sarah exchanged vows, Clara felt the weight of her past lift, replaced by a future she'd built with love, courage, and truth. Her parents' betrayal had shaped her, but it didn't define her. She was home not in Ohio or Oregon, but in the life she'd created, with Sarah by her side and a family that was learning to love her as she was.